Okay, so I'm going to start again from scratch with a new model for your spatial modelling subject using Revit, this time to make a massing model, and afterwards I'll try to do a version or the same model again using 3ds Max, just to show you some different ways of doing these things, and with the Max version maybe I'll take it a little bit further. So starting first in Revit though, I'm going to begin a new project file using the architectural template. So if you have the shortcut on your desktop, you can of course use that. I'm just using the menu, so that's clear. And as always, just making sure we've got ground floor as the starting view. Okay, so you can see here that we've got a floor plane that is going to be the base for this model. So I just asked the designer, so Angela, is this going to be the ground surface, or is that a platform or something?
It's actually slightly slants down, comes to here, and at this junction, about 3 steps going up. So there is a slight level.
So you're cutting into the ground, is that the idea?
You are
where it's stepping down?
Ground here, yes, as you go down. And this is so just lower, and then here, this is back at ground level. And that's your transition.
Okay, so where's the lowest point?
Probably down here.
Down here? So we've got, right, okay. And then how much does it rise up to the highest point?
3 steps.
3 steps, and so this would be the highest point down here?
Yes.
Yeah.
And over here.
And yeah, okay, yeah, great, thanks. Okay, so you want to have an idea about your levels first, and I'm going to go into either a section view or an elevation view, south elevation I might use, and we're going to make another level, just using the level button there, and set that to the height of that raised section, which is, we're saying 3 steps, so I'll just do them as standard steps, 150 high, so I'll make that 450. And a good little trick just to make that easier to read rather than fiddling with the grips or anything, I'm just going to change the scale there to 1 to 50, and then I will actually just break that line and move this up so that I can read that. Okay, so probably don't need any other levels for the roof just yet, but do you have an idea of the highest point, just roughly?
The highest point is maybe 9 metres.
9 metres, okay. Yep. So I might just mark that. I'm not going to make that a fixed thing, but I'm just going to set that roughly. And I might call that ridge. Okay, so back into floor plan. And then going to massing in site, I'm going to go to in-place mass. And it's going to give me a message telling me that the show mass option has been enabled. We want that, so there's no option to not have that. It's just a message to inform you. So I'm just going to hit close there, and I know that this button basically is used to turn on massing anyway. So I'm going to call this exterior building shell. Oops. And then looking at the image again, so I might start with this section here that is the lowest. So that basically is, from what I can tell, a rectangular form, but we've also got actually some other forms that are projecting off that and turning this end into an angle. So as always with Revit, if you have those critical or important elements in your design, it can help a lot to set them out with reference planes. So I'm just moving this over so I can see the two at once. There you go. So while you're making a mass, you can make reference planes, but they're not called reference planes, they're just called planes. Well, if you hover over that button, you'll see it does say reference plane, but make sure you don't get mixed up between reference lines and reference planes. The button that says reference is reference lines, and you shouldn't need reference lines at this stage. You probably want to stick with reference planes where possible. So, using a reference plane, I'm going to draw a line which is for this edge here, and just thinking about how this would go. So then the other one will be maybe at an angle like that. Am I on the right track? Is that basically... Sorry? Yeah, and so then you've got... So they're pretty much like that, are they? Yep, something like that. So we can always adjust these, but just to get a rough idea. And then we've got a surface coming up this way. This is almost parallel to it by the look of it, the one that's across here. And then we've got another one here that's kind of tapering out. And in fact, maybe it's even better if this is rotated, so I'll just bring that around a little bit before I draw the next one. So it's using rotate, and I'm just going to bring that around, maybe, and have that vertical. I think those two look like they're fairly close. Can always adjust it anyway. And then again, I'll draw another reference plane for the inside edge, which I think is tapering outwards a little bit. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, something like that, and then one coming across here for the end. So if you know those dimensions, you can put those in at this stage. Just going to measure here and get a rough idea. So that is 20. Oh no, sorry, that's 24 meters roughly, and this is again just a bit over 20 meters. So that's going to be really helpful when making all of these forms. And so again, starting. Oh, and actually, so we've got the section here as well, where that's lowered. So we've got a roof there, and then another roof starting here. Something like that. Just nudging these over a bit, using the arrows on the keyboard. Okay, so now I can start drawing lines, and this is really the basics. If you haven't done much with massing, the real difference between modelling using the massing tools and using the other modelling tools in Revit is that you don't make separate shapes for each extrusion or other solid that you're making. You make lines which can then be turned into anything, or they can just be left as lines. So lines refers to all of these things here. So clicking on the model line button there, you can see that I can choose any of these shapes. And I've also got the option of either drawing on a face or drawing on a work plane. So I'm going to choose draw on a work plane, and then here I'm going to make sure that it's got ground floor selected. So that's the first step, making sure you've got the line tool, choose the shape you want. I'm just going to stick with the line option. And so again, starting with this one here, so it would go across from this intersection, just tracing something like that. Will do. It's difficult to see them because I think, oh no, thin lines isn't turned on, so I'll just zoom in there. The lines are a bit light, but they're definitely there. So if I go to a 3D view, just using the house, so I can't see the reference planes, but I can see that shape. Now I can select it, and then to make that a 3D form, just click Create Form, and that extrudes it. So if you only have one shape selected, and a shape isn't just an individual line segment, it can be a collection of lines. So here, by selecting one line, it's going to select all four. And now, again, Create Form turns into a 3D shape. And I don't know which end is which, so I'm going to go back to the ground floor plan, and then going to select, just going to select that shape again. Well, in fact, just to make it clear to everyone, I'm going to draw a line over in space here, just to one side, so that when we look in the 3D view, be able to guess which side. So here we are. So that's the end over here that I want to work on. You can use the compass as well for that. So looking at north, south, east and west up here. But sometimes it doesn't hurt just to draw in some extra geometry. So there I'm going to click on the edge of that box now. And to get this raised section here, all I need to do is click and drag on the arrow there. That easy. Okay, so going back to my ground floor plan. And now we've got something a little bit complicated because you've got essentially this shape being cut out by this other one. So you've got this wall here that's really continuing along from this form here. So I want to make that separately. So first I'm just going to draw a line just like before, making sure I'm drawing on the level ground floor, and I'm going to just snap to these points here that I've got with my reference planes. And now looking in the 3D view, just so it's clear what I'm doing, that's now another shape. And I'm going to extrude it just with create form again. So they're overlapping. And yeah, so you could actually leave them as separate, except that we've got this wall here that you really want cutting around. And so I'll show you how to do that as well. So firstly, this is, well, let's look at the levels now. So going into the, let's see which elevation. So make back to the ground floor. So going into, yeah, the west elevation. So looking from this side. I can see my levels there. And so this is the larger shape, or the one I did first. If I click there, I'm going to select the edge running along the top there. But if I go to that edge and press Tab first, and then a second time, it'll go to the surface on top, and I can lift that up as a whole. And so now I want to lift this end of the shape, and I'm going to do that the same way. So there I'm looking at the corner, and if I press Tab enough times, in fact no, so what I'll have to do is go into a 3D view to get that edge. So there I'm going to press Tab until I get the edge there. And now I'm going to switch back to that west elevation, and it's still selected. And now I can click and drag to lift that up to the height of the level. So looking in the 3D view, now you can see that is sloping up. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because what I'm going to do next is cut this away. So maybe before I do that, actually I'll make this top lower. So actually, do you know the height of that wall there? 4 meters, okay. So one of the things I find pretty frustrating with Revit is the inability to make levels and views while you're making a family. So I need to finish the mass because I want to make a level. So I'm going to go to my south elevation again. And, well, I should really give my previous level a new name. So we're going to call this, well, it's really just raised upper ground, maybe, or mezzanine, I suppose. It's not really a mezzanine. I like calling things mezzanine because M comes after G in the alphabet. But let's see, if we're going to have roof, then upper ground isn't great. And I'm going to call it mezzanine. It's not really a mezzanine, but it goes well alphabetically. Okay, so I can go and make a new level over here. So the levels here really just acting as a guide more than anything. So this is roof 1, really. We're going to have several. And so 4 meters above here would make it 4450. Okay, and so now I can select that object and click Edit and Place, just like anything else you make that way, and I can keep adding to it. So if I go to my edge here, so either, sometimes you can just click on it directly, but if it doesn't come up straight away, then you can always use Tab to select it. Back into my west elevation, and now I can stretch the top just till it lines up with that level there. It won't snap to it with massing, but you can just do it by eye. That's good enough for things like this. So I've got that basic form, and maybe now looking at it I can see, well, the proportions aren't quite what I might want, so we can always adjust that using these surfaces. So I've just pressed Tab to select that. I'll just show you I can do that again in Plan. So just make sure I've got that edge there. Oh, sorry, not the edge, the surface. So I can stretch the whole object out. And at this point, then the reference planes may not be necessary anymore. If you want to align the reference planes with the objects after you've adjusted them, you can always use the Align tool and bring them back that way. Now you can see there things have gone out a little bit, so I'll just undo that. Just try that again. Yeah, it doesn't like that. So let's just try that one more time. What's going on there? Yeah, okay, that can happen sometimes. The line is pretty reliable, but with some things, yeah, it's more trouble than it's worth. So if that happens to you, it's easier just to draw a new reference plane in rather than trying to remove one. It's because that reference will probably be defined here. Yes, it's defined as a weak reference, so it's easier just to draw a new one sometimes. Okay, so again, I'm just trying to do this correctly. You probably can do this a little bit faster when you're doing your own designs. And then, what else have we got? Oh yeah, so then we've got this edge here, which probably needs to come down. So that can again just be selected and stretched. So you can see the dimension there. Now why have I ended up with 8 meters there? That's a bit odd. So I'm just going to go back to my west elevation. Oh, I went to the higher level. Okay, so that was wrong, so I better fix that too. So I'm just going to select that edge, and then again back to the west elevation. That can be adjusted. That's better. Okay, so you can obviously adjust any edge, and this is something you just can't do with regular solid modelling. If you haven't seen it before, you can adjust individual vertices. So I can select just a corner and adjust that individually as well. So that can be really good for this sort of geometry, but in this case, I probably don't need to do that. So it's getting there. The proportions still aren't quite right. So this is where I think it's useful just as a free-form modelling tool. So those reference planes can be good, but if you get to a point where they're getting in the way rather than helping you, it's often worth just getting rid of them and working with the geometry natively or directly. And so I can, just by selecting individual surfaces here, using Tab to highlight them, and then clicking and dragging on the arrow. Now you can see a couple of interesting things here. Notice how the arrow is orange, and that means it's dragging or pointing in the direction of that surface. Do you remember what you need to do if you want to change it to just straight X, Y, and Z? Spacebar. So notice how it's just rotating slightly, because at the moment that surface is at a slight angle. If you look at it in Plan, especially, you'll see it. Okay, so if I press space, now that arrow is pointing directly to the right instead. Okay, so either way, once I've dragged it, it's not going to be quite in line down here. So I'd need to go and fix that up back into the 3D view. So that can be done. using the edge there. There's a few options, but just using this edge, I should be able to drag it and get that to align with this point here. Actually, without a plane, that can be tricky. So the other option would be to use a line and choose the surface there on the outside, and then just choose the surface at the end there, and that will line up exactly. So that's probably the best way. Okay, so then the height still, to me, doesn't look right, so I'm going to drag this further back. So I know that the height is the right measurement, so I'm just going to get the proportions now to look something like this. So just dragging that a bit further. That's sort of getting there. So again, back to here now, I can use a line. Just line them up. And then now this one doesn't look like the right proportions to me now, so again I can just select the top there and drag that down and just get that basic shape that I'm after. Okay, so we've got then, again, this part where it's cut away, and also you can see now these surfaces don't line up. So need to make a decision there about which one is right. So, oh no, actually, sorry, they are in the same angle. You can see in plan, so they're both right. It's just that in 3D, yeah, this one's sloping up. So that's correct. Okay, so like I said, this next part is a little bit trickier because essentially we need to have a copy of that mass. And so I'm going to use, in the clipboard panel, the copy tool there. Basically, just so you know what I'm doing, I'm trying to cut away the part where these overlap. But I also want to take out a bit underneath as well. So I'm going to need to copy this shape and then turn the copy into a void. So again, in the clipboard panel, I'm going to click the copy to clipboard button. And then under paste, I'm just going to choose align to same place. So I've got a copy of that object overlapping the first one. Now I'm going to use tab to select the bottom surface there and just take that down so that it goes below the larger one. Otherwise we'd be left with that little part that's sticking out underneath. So now I want to select the entire new shape that I've made using tab to highlight the whole element, and in properties I can change that to a void. Now the problem is it's cutting away from everything, so I've got to go to, so it's cut away the solid shape as well of this one, so I've got to go back to uncut geometry and choose that void, and then try and find the other one, which is going to be a bit tricky, but I'll get it in the end. It is there. It's a bit painful, so what do we have to do? Might just uncut it from everything. It's a bit painful because they overlap completely. We'll have to do it a slightly different way. So let's go undo that. So this one here. Okay, so that object I'm going to stretch using, let's see, which surface? This one here. I'm just going to stretch that out because that'll be an easy one to bring back. Right, it'll make sense once I've done it. So I'm going to go, again, uncut geometry and choose, oh sorry, first before uncut, so turn this one into a void. There we go. Okay, so now that's good. It's not even cutting this large one, which was the problem before. And so then I can go to select that shape again. and stretch it back, and if I use the align tool I can choose that surface and then this one over here. Okay, it was just that extra step was just to prevent it cutting this one, and it might have actually cut it. That's what I expected would happen, and if it had I could have used uncut geometry to uncut it and then stretch it back. So going into a shaded view, hopefully a bit clearer than what I've got. So basically we've got this here as a continuous surface, and then this is another surface we can make into a wall. The rest of it's fairly straightforward. So I'm just going to make a box for the next part. So again, just using the line tool and clicking on those intersection points. Back into 3D. And create form. Just that part in between. And then for the final part, again, pretty straightforward, except this may be sloping up as well. So back to model. Actually, just so it's clear, I'm going to draw this from the intersection here because this point has a height, and I'll often have 3D snapping on, so it could snap to the top. So it's just a habit I've got, trying to snap to points that I know are on the ground. So clicking on those points there. So again, back into the 3D view just so I can see the shape there, and I can easily select that now. Create form. So firstly, I want to lift that surface up just so that it's higher than the one next to it. And then either clicking or using tab to click on that point there, it can just stretch that up. So there we are. So that's the exterior shell.
Do you want to create the spaces inside?
Yeah, so I'll do that as another mass. Yeah. Okay, so we've got some openings as well, and I might just start to model some of those. So I'm going to do a rectangle, but this time I'm going to change the plane to mezzanine, which we know is at that higher level. And so I can draw a rectangle here and check in plan that it's where I want that opening to be. So it's covering, because it's in hidden lines, I'm going to go to wireframe and then I can see the whole shape. So I'm just going to make that centered, and a good trick here, to select a single line segment that's part of a shape, you simply need to click again after you've selected the shape. So I'll just show you that again. So if I select the rectangle, just need to click on that line segment again to get that side, and now I can move it separately. Okay, so same over here. There we are. So back into the 3D view, just so again you can see it all. So this time I'll select that rectangle, and I'm just going to go straight to void form this time, instead of making it a solid and then turning it into a void. So I've made a void, it's going up, and I'm going to take that up a bit higher, and maybe so that I can bring it closer to the edge, I might bring that surface there at the back a bit closer to the outside. That'll do. And then now to select my void, because I've deselected it, I need to go to the edge that the void's created, and then use tab to cycle through all the different objects, and then I'll get the void back, and now I can use tab within the void to select the top there and simply lift that up. So notice if I go too far it'll create some problems, so it's going to leave a little bit over the top of that opening. That's good. Okay, so if you're wondering before why I couldn't select that solid that had been completely taken away from using the void, it was because there were no edges left to select, or there was nothing I could select with that solid, so that's why I had to make this one bigger. Okay, so we've got a few other openings in there, maybe I can come back to those. But I'll finish that one as it is, so I'm just going to go finish mass, and probably a good time to save the file. So before I go and make some interior walls using a similar approach, I'm just going to start to turn these into walls. And actually it's easiest if you go to the Massing and Site tab, and you'll see there you've got these Model by Face tools. So I'll just start with the Wall by Face, and then I'm going to start with a very simple wall, just maybe generic 200, I think might work well. I'm going to leave it on Finish Face Exterior, and then simply choose some of these surfaces. So notice how it's automatically going around the opening and turning all of these into flat walls. So really when you're doing your modelling, you want to think about the geometry you're trying to get Revit to create. And that's why I spent a bit of time making the void cut away this part of it, because I knew I wanted this wall to continue all the way. And the same here, I wanted this wall to be cut out. So I don't really mind what's happening with a lot of the geometry that's left over. Here I've got this part sticking in, doesn't matter because that'll be hidden. Okay, so coming down to here, we've got another wall, and that should hopefully be... okay, so that's turning out to be one solid wall, but we can adjust that. So I'll come back to that. So going back to the other side then, you can choose these, not a problem. So all of those surfaces can easily be made into walls. This part, there's something funny happening, so maybe I'll just do that as a flat one for now, and again, we can come back to that. And I'm going to leave that open because that's what it looks like it is here, so that's okay. And then just a wall there should be all I need. Okay, so just to make it crystal clear what massing is there for, essentially, I'm going to turn the massing off. So that button that you have on the Massing and Site tab, next to the Modify button, basically the first button there, when you click on the top of it, that's a toggle to turn massing on and off. Now, having done that, it's not working, so it must have changed the template. We'll fix that in a moment. So I'm going to duplicate this view. Someone must have fiddled with the template. And I'm going to duplicate the 3D view and then just change some of the view settings so that that does work. Yours, this probably won't happen. When you press that toggle, it should toggle massing on and off. But I'm going to go and look at the visibility settings, and we can see there that mass is ticked. So by default, that's actually turned off. And there we are. So now it toggles. So when you have mass turned on in your visibility settings, if you have that ticked, then this button won't do anything because massing's always turned on. But when massing is turned off, this button toggles massing on and off. So it's a special visibility setting. So with the massing toggled off, you can see the physical objects that I've made. So these are the walls, and in a moment I'll make some floors and some roofs to finish off that envelope. So I can see I've missed a wall here. So I can turn massing back on and then go back to the wall tool and simply pick that surface to make a wall. Okay, so oh yes, I'll do some roofs as well. So the roof tool, you've got some options there. So you've got faces at top of roof, faces at bottom of roof. So if you use faces at top of roof, and I might go for a just a 150mm, or even I'll just go for a 125. No. So I'll start with the 125, and I'll duplicate it and make it 200mm, and then edit this and make it 200. So okay, so just like a normal roof, and then now I can pick that surface. Here you've got to click Create Roof to create it. So that's with roof faces at top of roof, and you can see there that it's gone down into the walls, and I don't want that. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to change the option there to faces at bottom of roof. Pick it, Create Roof, and it puts it there all the way. So I'll just show you a couple of little tricks there to make that into a nice set of clean geometry, I'm going to first just toggle the massing off, and you can see there already we've got some issues. This isn't touching. So the wall there is giving us some, well, the massing really is giving some unusual geometry. On this side, yeah, it's the same there. So this does happen quite a bit with massing. And so, a couple of tricks. You can use the roof and put in an offset, so you can just make it maybe minus 100, so that it overlaps. And then that wall, you can be fairly sure it's set to use the finished material if you're using one of the generic walls. So you can use, or set the roof to have the same material, finish. So if you don't know that material, that's one that you should be using with Revit. That's kind of like a default white material that's always there in your templates. So they're the same material. And now I can use join geometry on the modify tab and choose the roof and the walls. So make it look like a nice clean model. There we are. So a little bit sticking over there, sticking out that little dot. I don't know which one that is, doesn't really matter. Okay, so going around here, I can do the same thing and make it look like a really nice joined model. Okay, so that helps to clean it up. And so the great thing about this though is it's all Revit elements or families. So I can put in a door or window to these things, no problem. They're not just dumb 3D objects. Okay, so doors, windows, they'll work just fine in this geometry. Okay, so then coming back to the massing, you may want to adjust that a bit further. So back to massing and site, toggle the massing on. I can select that, and what I like to have when I'm working with massing is a view set up to show just the massing. So I'm going to duplicate that and rename it and call it 3D massing only. Going to go to the visibility settings and simply select everything up to massing using Shift and turn that off. Select massing, turn it on, and then select everything after massing and also turn that off. So that way I only see the massing in that view. In the other views I'll see everything. So I might want that to change. There was something that we needed to change. Oh, yep, so here. Okay, so I want this edge here not to go all the way through. So I'm going to select this, edit in place, and I'm just going to bring that edge back. I want it to come through to the corner here. So what I'm going to do is find the edge there that's on the vertical and adjust that. So, oh yeah, now when this happens you can see I'm not getting the arrows there. It's because it's join geometry. So I'm going to unjoin. So you'll find with Revit, join geometry is a great option most of the time, but it can make things harder to edit, especially when you're doing solid modelling or massing. So here, unjoin geometry, I'm going to choose this one and then this one, and that should make sure they're unjoined. So now, using tab, well firstly let's go to the edge, and then with tab, there we are. So now I can select that edge and just drag it away. And I might just drag it over slightly as well so there's no gap. And so then the void is still cutting that hole out, so I've got to adjust that as well. So I've got to use tab to get that void. There's the void. And then again tab to get the edge. And I can again adjust that. Just move that over. Okay. So it's just a little refinement, but it does give me a surface there that's continuous. So I'll finish that mass. And now back to a view where I can see the walls. Okay, so I've changed my mass a little bit. Now I want the wall to reflect that change. So I'm simply going to select the wall. And then up here, you've got the option Update to Face. Okay, and then that's okay. I'm going to click OK. And you can see then it's adjusted it to reflect the changes. Okay, so that is going to give you, not without too much of an issue, I think, this shell. And so then to do, maybe for the interior, we want some walls that are deformed in a similar way, but more flat surfaces. And they can even be easier than doing that sort of solid geometry that I've just been doing with massing. So something else that isn't obvious with massing at first is that you can make as many mass families as you like and have them overlapping. You don't need to do it all in the one family. So I'm going to go back to in-place mass and make a new one. So I'm going to call this interior partitions, or just interior walls will do. Okay, so I'm going to just draw some very simple things, starting with modelled lines again. Just going to draw some lines here, so fairly randomly. So I might do that one by itself and then a couple over here that are connected. Okay, so then if I go to the 3D view with massing only, I can see those shapes. So another interesting thing that you have with massing that you don't with normal modelling in Revit is the ability to extrude single shapes. It doesn't have to be a closed shape like it does if it's an extrusion or a blend or any of those other things you've probably been doing. So I can select that single line and click Create Form. And it extrudes it, so you get a flat surface, which is extremely useful. Now, just watch out, if I had that selected with the other one, so this is a shape that's also open, in other words, not closed, and I'm going to hold down Control and select the line, and then Create Form, what do you think will happen? Sorry? Kind of, yeah, we'll join them, but in a way you might not be expecting. It's going to revolve. Yeah, so you've got to watch out for that. When you select more than one shape, Revit thinks that you're trying to do a different modelling operation. So you can actually do every modelling operation that you're used to with solid modelling. In other words, extrusions, blends, sweeps, revolves, swept blends, and a lot more besides. You can do lofting, you can do, in other words, sweeping with changing profiles, and lots of other things. So it's a really powerful modelling system, but the way you access those tools is by selecting combinations of shapes. So what you should be doing is extruding everything separately if you don't want one of those operations. And you can do a lot just starting with an extrusion. So again, by selecting that shape by itself and then Create Form, it'll give me what I'm expecting, which is an extrusion. And now I can select one of the corners and stretch that separately. I can also move it. So if I use a combination of arrows, up until now I've just been clicking on an individual arrow, but I can click on the little right angle in between, and that will get both. So in this case, it's the blue right angle between X and Y, between the green and the red, which means it's going to move X and Y together. So I'm moving this, as though in plan I'm moving it from above. So you can see that again. Now the points here, we're only seeing it being cut through here in the plan, but the point is up there. Okay, so that's something you just could not do with a normal piece of solid geometry in Revit. You could do a blend, I suppose, and cut a void at an angle, but it would be complicated. And I think even then, next to impossible. So Okay, so we've got there a really interesting bit of geometry, just starting with a single line and then changing the points, the 2 points on the top of that line. So I could maybe even bend it the other way to get something different. So that's how you make unusual wall shapes and shapes for anything really in Revit. So it's telling me the mass only contains mesh geometry. In other words, there are no solid shapes there because I haven't extruded any closed shapes. That's fine. I don't need any solid shapes. Back to massing in sight, and then again, wall by face, and I can choose that surface and make it into a wall. So here it's hidden line, but if I go to wireframe, okay, so there's my wall. And just like any other wall in Revit, I can put a door into that if I want to, just to show you it is a regular wall. Just to make it easier to get to it, I'm going to isolate it and just prove to you I can put a door in it. Okay, so obviously when you have sloping geometry, you need to work out how your openings are going to interact with that. Openings generally are perpendicular to the ground, so you will have issues, and the usual problem is the depth of the wall. You might need to make it a lot greater than you might have originally, and that will often give you enough to be able to, if you have especially a different... Oh, of course, yeah. But here, actually, if I get a door that doesn't have an architrave on it, like that one does, then it should work pretty well. So I've got here some doors that I've made that don't have architraves. Okay, so it's almost there, just needs to have a bit more thickness to the wall, and that will cover up the door there. But on this side you can see that's okay. Alright, so going back to here. Okay, so then to get back into the family, I might go to my massing only view, select that surface, edit in place, and then I've got the other one, which again I can select, and create form, and just like the line, I can select any point there, but you can see here these two surfaces are connected to that point, so when I drag here, they'll go up together. So even for simple things, sometimes when you have spiral stairs, or any curved stair really, and you've got to do a wall that's following up underneath that stair, this is the only way you can do it in Revit. It's a really difficult thing otherwise. But with massing, it's not too bad. Sorry, lady, did you want me to look at something? No. Oh yeah, sure, I'll have a look in a second. Okay, so I've got there another piece of wall geometry. And so I'll finish the mass, and I'm sure you realise already that I can pick that surface to make some more walls. But you don't need to use all of them, so you might just use two, and you could leave one out. That's absolutely fine. Okay, so that way you can make all sorts of complex geometry that just wouldn't be possible with the regular tools in Revit. Well, it's really all there is to it, and I'll just bring that all back. Oh, I didn't show you floors. Sorry, I better show you that. So there we've got a sloping floor. And so back to massing in sight. So I've shown you the wall by face, roof by face, and then you also have floor. But floors are expected to be flat. Right, so if it's a ramp, so here, if we choose floor, it won't let me pick the surface there. And if I go firstly and select the mass, you have an option there for mass floors. So again, floors should be flat because, as you know, humans, we need flat surfaces to walk on. If they're sloping, they're ramps. So you can do them differently. So there are two options. You can either use mass floors, and that will cut these level slices through your model. And so I can tick ground floor and mezzanine, click OK, and I might just isolate that object so you can see basically what it's done. Might not be all that obvious, but it has cut a floor plate at each of those heights. And so now if I go to floor, I should be able to choose. Oh no, sorry, didn't actually get it. I missed it. Okay, so it was too low. So the floor tool's not going to work very well with this model. It should if I bring the levels up a little bit. And so mezzanine, maybe I'll just lift that to 470. That one I thought definitely would have come up. So, oh yep, there we are. So it is there. I don't know why it didn't come up before. So there's the floor plate. I don't know why I couldn't see it before. Okay, so now if I go back to the floor by face, I can pick, there we are. So there's a floor plate, but it's flat. And there is another one, so there's the ground floor. So they did come in. Okay, so if you want a sloping surface, there are instances where the wall tool will work. So here you can see it's actually letting you pick the bottom there. But that's a bit messy. So what I found is a better way would be just to make it manually. Once you've done the walls, floor by face maybe is going to be too tricky with models like this, so sometimes it's easy just to go straight to using the floor tool. And you can use pick walls. So I can pick the outside edge of these walls and then trim. There we go. Finish, and it's going to say, do I want to join? Yes, I do. So nearly always when you ask that question, say yes to joining, but not attaching. Okay, so my floor's sticking out. Well, it's lining up underneath the walls, but it's looks like it's sticking out because it's flat and it's not sloping up like this wall does. So, do any of you know how to make a floor slope? There is a way. So if you go to the on the Modify tab, you'll see there's an option there, Modify Sub-Elements. Then you can choose either a corner point or an edge, and simply either type a number or click and drag, and it will snap to things you've made like walls. So you can slope any floor that way to any angle you want. It's a really powerful modelling technique actually. So you can see there that lines up exactly with the corner there. It's sticking out actually in a way. Let's see what's happening there. Oh no, that's right, that's how it should be. Yep, that's perfect. Okay, so that's it. Now if I just cancel. Right, so just like the roof, I'm going to make that floor have a plane surface. So I'm going to just change the thickness to match the same as everything else, 200. And then after I've done that, change the material to that one I've used for everything else, finish. So now if I use join geometry, so what I'm going to do now is make a view, because I'm going to be doing a lot where I want the massing turned off. And I'm going to turn the massing off permanently in this view. Oh, sorry, I'm going to just use the toggle for that now. Okay, so then I can use join and choose my wall and the floor. Okay, so look, sometimes you will get this issue. You can see there it doesn't want to join everything. It's a bit of a pain. So any of you know the option that you can use if you have lines that aren't being removed with the join tool in Revit. There's one last option, and this is one of the most, I won't say advanced, but something that you will really only appreciate when you've made a few projects with Revit and you really want to get some control over the lines. The line work tool. It's on the Modify tab, and that lets you override any line in any of your views in Revit. So you can click on that, and then you've got your line styles, and you can set those to any that you have in your project. So I'm simply going to choose invisible lines, and then choose these edges. So there are two lines there, so I've got to click twice because there's one line from the floor and one line from the wall. Okay, so there we are. I'm just getting rid of all of those lines there. So I get a nice clean looking model. Okay, so there's a line missing from there, which I could add in again using a model line or a few different ways, but otherwise that's looking pretty good. And okay, so as I was saying before, if you can do geometry like this with Revit, it means you can do everything natively in Revit, which is going to give you plans, sections, elevations, and everything else automatically. If you do it in 3ds Max, then you need to work out a way of getting it back into Revit, which is fairly difficult, and then create everything that way.
How about the outside?
But you can do it. You can get anything you've made in 3ds Max back into Revit. Sorry?
So you have some steps outside?
Oh yeah, that's just simple modelling. So they would be just extrusions. So if you do, I wouldn't even use massing for those. I'd just go straight to model in place, and then set a category, maybe floors. So these could be steps, and then using extrusions, that would just be simple shapes drawn in plan. And then maybe offset. Oops. Something like this. Yeah, that's fine. Yes, sir. Okay, so no. So only use massing where you have to. Yeah. So that will give you the first step, and then the second step would be another extrusion on top of that. So using pick lines there, then I can use offset and make it 500. So they're just simple extrusions. And then the last one would be $250. Okay, so I didn't do the heights because they can easily just be done in 3D view afterwards. So the first one would be 150 high. The second one would be starting at 150 and finishing at 300. And then third starting at 300 and finishing at 450. And then you could use join to make them appear as one. Okay, so that would give you simple steps, and you could easily model the other things as well using extrusions. Okay, so is that all fairly clear, that you can basically work with those shapes, almost the same as if you remember using the editable polys in 3ds Max. The ones in 3ds Max are a bit more consistent, so there's not as much, I suppose, jiggling or just fiddling with the way the objects join together, because it's a bit more, well, you're getting a bit more control with Max essentially. But Revit still does a really good job with that basic mass modelling. And so I'll go back to the finished view with the mask turned off. And so of course you can spend time when it's just a mass refining the design, and then just gradually build up the physical objects, the walls and the floors and the other things that you need.